The Rev Dr Sandy Seaton-Todd is a preacher, teacher, mother of 5, and the pastor of the Church of the Western Reserve in Pepper Pike, Ohio. Her sermons cover a range of topics determined by the lectionary. These videos are short excerpts of one of her recent sermons.
Well-being comes from God's power and our obedience. Now, obedience is one of those tricky words. It has some baggage, it has some negative connotations. But really, in the scheme of the Bible, obedience means connection to God, being in the will of God, doing what God calls us to do. So all of life is really about God's power on one hand, and our being connected to God, to being vessels of God on the other. God's power, our obedience. In what ways do you individually need well-being? In what ways do you recognize in yourself, in your life, in your relationships, in your ways of being that you are not well? See, we don't know why or when God chooses to heal. What we know is God has the power to heal. What we have control over is putting ourselves in a position where we can be connected to God's will. We can be a vessel of God's love. We can be in a state that we are looking ahead. We are looking forward. We're not so self-absorbed, but we're looking at the horizon. We're looking at what God is doing out there, and we're joining God in that work. God's power and our obedience are what make us well. So let's look at this story in 2 Kings 5 about Naaman. Yes, he was a powerful warrior. He was a commander of an army, but he was sick. How many times do we have power and yet we're still sick? He was sick. And they had this girl who was a spoil of war, and so she was there, and she knew how he could be healed. She said, there's someone in Israel, the king, he can heal you, there's a prophet. I don't know if she confused that the king was the prophet, or she knew that the king would know who the prophet was, or she just knew there were prophets in Israel. But she said, I know how you can be healed. And so Naaman, being obedient, taking instruction well from this girl without any power, went to the king and said, send me there. And so the king took instruction from his army commander, from this young girl, wrote a letter and sent Naaman off to the king of Israel to be healed. And then the story takes a turn, because the king of Israel did not react well. The king of Israel was reactive in a negative way. He read the letter and he said, what? He's commanding me to heal you? He thinks I have the power to heal you? What does he think, I'm God? Now, where would that reaction come from? He sent Naaman away because he was mad. It comes from an insecurity. It comes from an inadequacy. It comes from a what? He's trying to put on me that I'm going to heal you, and what if I fail? Have you ever been there? A task is given to you and you don't think you're up for it. We find fault with the other. We blame someone else. We react negatively with a temper. We turn our backs, we run away, all because inside, knowing it or not knowing it, consciously or not consciously, we are insecure. We're inadequate. So we become reactive. Do you recognize that in yourself? We do it at all times of life, from beginning to end. We react. And all that does is put a wall up between us and God's plan for us. We block being a vessel for God's will out of our own human insecurity. That's what the king of Israel did. He was called on by God to heal Naaman. And yet, because he said, I'm not God, who does this king think I am? He reacted, and he sent Naaman away when he could have been the hero of the story. Yes, God knew that God could give him his power. But the king of Israel had to be obedient. He had to accept it. He had to receive it. He had to walk with God. And he walked the other way.